You've done it thousands of times, maybe tens of thousands. You've done it without thinking about it, without questioning it, without once stopping to ask the completely reasonable question of why you're pressing the soft tissue of your lips against another person's face and what exactly you expected to accomplish by doing that. It feels natural. It feels obvious. It feels like one of those things that's just part of being human, like laughing or crying or arguing about what to watch on television. Kissing feels hardwired. It feels ancient. It feels universal. Here's the problem. It isn't. Roughly 46% of human cultures studied kiss romantically, which sounds like a lot until you flip it around. More than half of the cultures ever studied by anthropologists do not kiss the way you do. Some of them find the idea confusing. Some find it unhygienic. Some find it frankly bizarre that anyone would press their open mouth against a stranger's face and call that intimacy. The Manihuku people of Brazil reportedly described kissing when they first encountered it as gross. The Lepcha people of Sikkim considered it disgusting. Several indigenous groups in sub-Saharan Africa and the Pacific Islands have no cultural tradition of romantic kissing whatsoever. They have other forms of intimacy. They have closeness, tenderness, attachment. They just don't do it with their mouths pressed together.
So if kissing isn't universal, it is an instinct. And if it isn't instinct, the question opens up in a way that suddenly feels very strange. Where did this come from? Why does it feel so fundamental to those of us who do it? And what is actually happening, biologically and neurologically, in the seconds your brain thinks you're just being romantic?
The answer involves ancient primates, a mother feeding her child, the most nerve-dense patch of tissue on the human body, and a biological compatibility scan so sophisticated it makes most modern technology look embarrassing. By the end of this video, you will never think about kissing the same way again. Let's go. First, let's deal with the animal question, because it's the obvious one, and it sets up everything else. Do other animals kiss? The honest answer is sort of, but not the way you think. Bonobos, our closest relatives alongside chimpanzees, press their mouths together frequently. They do it after conflicts to restore social harmony. They do it as greeting. They do it in ways that look from a distance remarkably like what you'd see at an airport arrivals gate. Chimpanzees do something similar, though less frequently and with less apparent enthusiasm. Elephants sometimes put the tips of their trunks into each other's mouths in what researchers describe as a gesture of trust and social bonding. Some species of fish press their mouths together during what appears to be dominance contests. Certain birds touch beaks, horses nuzzle muzzles. The mouth-to-mouth contact behavior is not uniquely human. It shows up across the animal kingdom in scattered, varied, contextually different forms. But here's what is different. None of those animals do it the way humans do. Not with the same frequency, not with the same emotional loading, not with the same neurochemical cascade, not embedded in the same complex social and romantic architecture that surrounds human kissing. A bonobo pressing its lips to another bonobo's lips after a fight is doing something real and socially meaningful, but it is not falling in love. It is not marking the beginning of a relationship. It is not something that gets remembered for decades. The behavior exists across species. The meaning is ours alone. Which raises the actual question evolutionary biologists have been circling for years. If kissing isn't a universal human instinct, and if the basic mouth contact behavior appears in other animals in completely different contexts, then what is the origin of the specifically human romantic kiss? Where did this particular behavior, with this particular meaning, actually come from? This is where it gets genuinely strange. And I want you to stay with this next section, because your first instinct is going to be to find it unsettling. That instinct is exactly the right response. And then I want you to sit with what it actually means, because what it means is something much more human than it first appears. The most scientifically supported theory for the origin of human kissing is called the Premastication Hypothesis.
And to understand it, you need to go back to a world before baby food, before blenders, before agriculture, before pottery even. A world where a human infant needed solid food before it had teeth capable of processing solid food. A world where the only available tool for solving that problem was another human mouth.
Premastication is the practice of a caregiver, almost always the mother, chewing food until it is soft and partially broken down, and then transferring it directly from their mouth to the infant's mouth, lip to lip, mouth to mouth. This is not a fringe behavior from one isolated culture. Researchers have documented premastication across cultures on every inhabited continent. It has been observed in Africa, Asia, the Americas, Oceania, and historically across Europe. It is practiced today in communities across sub-Saharan Africa and parts of Southeast Asia. Chimpanzees do it. Gorillas do it. It is ancient. It is widespread. And it is, from a nutritional and biological standpoint, extraordinarily effective. But here is what makes this relevant to kissing specifically. And this is the part that the textbook version of the story usually glosses over. Premastication is not just food transfer. It is one of the most information-dense physical exchanges that occurs between two human beings. When a mother transfers chewed food to an infant, she is also transferring her microbiome, her immune data, antibodies, hormonal information, the biological record of every pathogen her immune system has ever encountered and defeated. She is, in a very literal sense, downloading her immune history into her child's developing system. Researchers studying premastication have found that infants who receive it show measurably different microbiome development than those who don't. The mouth-to-mouth transfer is a biological handshake, a data exchange, an act of deep, embodied care that runs on a level far below conscious awareness. The argument made by anthropologist Von Bell and others working in evolutionary psychology is that the romantic kiss is the cultural and evolutionary descendant of this behavior, that hundreds of thousands of years of mouth-to-mouth transfer encoded in our nervous systems as the most intimate possible physical act between a caregiver and a dependent became the template onto which adult romantic intimacy was later mapped. The gesture that meant "I will keep you alive" became the gesture that meant "I love you." The most fundamental act of care became the most fundamental act of connection. That's not less romantic. That's more human than almost anything else in this story. But let's talk about what's actually happening in your brain and body during a kiss, because this is the part that genuinely should make you stop and reconsider what you think is going on in those moments. The lips are extraordinary. They are among the most densely innervated patches of tissue in the entire human body. More nerve endings per square centimeter than your fingertips, more than the back of your hand, more than almost anywhere else on the external surface of your body. Your lips are built for sensitivity in a way that goes far beyond their obvious functions of eating and speaking. When two sets of lips make contact, the sensory signal that fires toward the brain is disproportionately large relative to the size of the area involved. The brain devotes more real estate to processing information from the lips than from most of the rest of the body. This is not an accident. This is engineering. And when that contact happens in a romantic context, the neurochemical response is immediate and significant. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, the molecule that fires during childbirth, during breastfeeding, during skin-to-skin contact between parent and infant, surges. Dopamine, the brain's reward and motivation chemical, floods the system. Serotonin levels shift. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, measurably drops in bonded couples during kissing. Your body reads a kiss from someone you're attached to as a signal that you are safe, that the threat level has decreased, that something good is happening. The brain, operating on machinery hundreds of thousands of years old, responds accordingly. But here's the thing nobody mentions in the romantic version of this story. The brain is also, simultaneously, doing something far more calculating. It is running a compatibility scan. Human saliva contains a remarkable amount of biological information: immune markers, cortisol levels, genetic indicators. Research on the major histocompatibility complex, a set of genes that play a central role in immune function, has found that people tend to be more attracted to partners whose MHC profile is different from their own. Different MHC profiles produce offspring with broader immune coverage. Evolution, that cold and relentless optimizer, has an interest in making sure you mate with someone whose immune system complements yours rather than duplicates it. And one of the mechanisms it may use to nudge you in that direction is the chemical information exchanged during kissing. There is evidence that people find kissing less enjoyable with partners whose MHC profile is too similar to their own. The chemistry feels off. Not metaphorically, literally. The chemistry feels off because the chemistry is off. Kissing, from the brain's perspective, is not a declaration. It is a question. The conscious mind experiences romance. The immune system is running a database query.
There's one more layer to this story that almost never gets discussed, and it matters for understanding how something this widespread and this loaded with meaning could still not be universal. The oldest written reference to kissing in a romantic context appears in the Vedic Sanskrit texts of ancient India, dating to around 1500 BCE. The texts describe people pressing their noses together and inhaling each other's breath, something between what we'd call kissing and what we'd call nuzzling. Ancient Egyptian artwork depicts couples in close facial contact. Roman literature is saturated with kissing as a social practice across multiple contexts: romantic, political, religious. The Romans had 3 distinct Latin words for different types of kisses: osculum, a kiss of friendship or greeting; basium, a kiss of affection; suavium, a kiss of passion. They were a civilization that thought carefully enough about kissing to build a taxonomy around it.
And then there is the question of how kissing spread. Because the global distribution of romantic kissing is not random. It clusters in ways that track historical trade routes, migration patterns, and conquest. Some researchers have argued that Alexander the Great's military campaigns across Persia, Central Asia, and into the Indian subcontinent may have contributed to spreading kissing customs across cultures that previously had different intimacy norms. Later, European colonialism carried European kissing practices into contact with cultures that had developed entirely different physical intimacy traditions. The romantic kiss, as a global norm, is partially a story of cultural transmission. It traveled, it spread, it was learned as much as it was felt. Which brings us back to the question this whole video started with. Why do humans kiss? The honest answer is that we don't fully know. And anyone who tells you otherwise is simplifying a picture that is genuinely complicated. What we do know is this: the behavior is ancient. The mouth-to-mouth contact between intimates traces back in some form hundreds of thousands of years to a gesture of care so fundamental it was one of the first acts of human nurturing. It evolved in the nervous system as the most intimate physical act possible between a caregiver and the person most dependent on them. And somewhere in the long human story, that intimacy got transferred onto friendship, onto romance, onto love. It became language. It became symbol. It became the opening and closing punctuation of the most important relationships in a human life. Not because evolution designed it that way, because humans, being the meaning-making creatures we are, took a biological behavior and made it mean everything.
The brain running its quiet compatibility scan, the immune system exchanging data, the oxytocin surging, the cortisol dropping, and underneath all of it, the oldest signal in the human repertoire, the one that started not with romance, but with survival, with a mother and a child, and the most careful thing one human being can do for another. The next time you kiss someone, you are running a program older than language, older than agriculture, older than every civilization you've ever read about in a history book. You are doing what humans have always done. You are making contact. You are saying, without words, in the oldest dialect our species has, I am here. You are safe. This is real. And somewhere in the back of your brain, underneath the romance and the feeling and the moment, a very ancient system quietly agrees.